Welcome back, everyone, to episode 9 of the Ricky C. Williams podcast, the #1 anger management podcast in the world. Thank you to each and every one of you that keeps coming back week after week to listen, learn, and to grow. And today we're going to be discussing 3 amazing stories. One, we're going to talk about President Joe Biden. Secondly, we're going to talk about what's going on in Columbus, Ohio. And third, we're going to discuss what's going on in Hollywood right now. So let's first start off by talking about how the President of the United States, President Joe Biden, is cementing his legacy by celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Violence Against Women's Act. Then we're going to go to Columbus, Ohio, where there's a disturbing rise of domestic violence. Related homicides has gone up. I've done a podcast about this before in the Midwest about what's going on in Chicago. Now we're moving over a little bit to what's going on in Columbus, Ohio. And finally, we're going to talk about a story that's making big waves in Hollywood with the WWE star Nikki as she files for divorce from her husband, Artem. So it goes from highs to unfortunately lows. And we're going to talk about all of this. So don't skip this episode as we explore the details and the broader implications for our society and what we can do to combat domestic abuse. Let's get started. So let's jump right into it. We're going to discuss President Joe Biden's legacy. Some people may not like Joe Biden. Some people may love Joe Biden. Some people think that he was a hard-nosed politician who fought for justice. Some people think that he could be the worst president in the United States. But today we're going to talk about what his legacy and what he's going to submit as a part of his legacy, which is the Violence Against Women's Act. Now, Biden introduced this legislation as a senator, and he hosted nearly 1,000 survivors, advocates, and staffers and allies, which is amazing. I'm glad that we had somebody to put this in the forefront of our society. It's necessary that we talk about it. And what's great is that now there's new measures to combat gender-based violence. So I hope as he is cementing his legacy, he will also include what happens to children as well as men who are also abused. I do believe that we need more men to open up and talk about their abuse as well as teachers and other parents and civil servants seeing children acting out or shutting down, and we recognize what's going on with them and we step forward on their behalf. Now, the progress that this legislation has had, it's highlighting a new culture shift, which is very important. Biden stressed the need to have continued cultural change to combat the issue, which means I believe that we need to normalize the fact that men, children, and women, all of us, can be abused and have been in abusive relationships. I think now is the time for men to be able to open up and discuss, just like women open up and discuss what was going on. They had legislation for women to open up. And I do believe that they should also have legislation for men to open up about the issues that they also go through. So, as President Biden is in his transition, and after deciding not to run for a second term, he's putting all of his focus in this. So that's amazing. We cannot knock him. Again, we don't have to agree with everything that he did while he was in his presidency, but to have this fight, to have this conversation, you cannot take that away from him. So I think that's amazing. I think the efforts that he put forth 30 years ago made a change. And there was over $690 million in grants from the Justice Department to support survivors. That's huge. Hopefully we could get to $1 billion to help all survivors. But this is amazing. And the creation of the Office of Gender-Based Violence within the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So these are some new efforts to combat that. There's also support from the National Resource Center on cybercrimes. If you know anything about me, I talk about that, and I had a podcast about cybercrimes and how people are using GPS to find people, to stalk people, how they can break into your phones if you scan different items that come to your door. So I'm glad he's putting forth effort on cybercrimes, because that's huge, because we're in a new age now. Excuse me. And I'm glad there's a commitment from tech companies to combat AI created images based off of sexual abuse, because that's also a thing, as things change, it was revenge porn where people will record their significant other at the time or their ex in sexual acts, and then they would post them, to embarrass that person. So I'm glad that they are taking these huge steps. Now, the impact of VAWA, if you will, over the years, there's provisions which has provided critical resources like the National Domestic Violence Hotline and grants for shelters and crisis centers. And this law has trained law enforcement and judicial professionals on gender-based violence issues. Now, I do believe there should be more training. Because I taught anger management, a lot of people came to my court-ordered classes, and a lot of times I heard that when a man was trying to leave, a woman would jump in front of a door and he would push the woman out of the way, and it's like, oh my God, put your hands on me. And they would have to take anger management classes. I do believe that when police officers are called, that they will be able to do a better assessment to see that sometimes the men are attacked and most men don't say anything. They'd rather just try to calm down the situations themselves or walk away from the situations. But, when emotions are high, intelligence are low, and, a lot of things can happen. And I do hope that police officers have more training on how to identify who is the true victim and who is the true villain in those situations. So kudos to what has happened, but to continue to press forward to see what can happen in the future is going to be amazing, and I will be on top of that because I believe in equality when it comes to victims as well as villains, regardless of gender. So I'm glad law enforcement are getting training. I think we need more of that. Now, the law that's evolving, now they're talking about the LGBTQ community, which is now coming up with more stats about the abuse that happens within their relationships. I do hope that, the law also protects that community as well. So kudos to Joe Biden. Congratulations for being vice president as well as president, and now cementing his legacy with a domestic violence act. And hopefully he will continue to press forward, and everyone around him who supports him. I hope this could be a bipartisan bill where everyone could actually say domestic abuse is wrong, regardless of gender. If it's wrong, it's wrong. So now, sliding down this slippery slope, we must continue to talk about how this bill focused on how a lot of women were hurt during these past 30 years. And I'm glad that there was a woman named Marica Phipps-Johnson, who was a survivor of domestic abuse, how she shared her experiences. And she reflected on how she could have been one of those recent victims that, people in, like I said, right now, the podcasts that I've done were in the Midwest. A lot of people are dying. They're getting beaten to death, shot. So she highlighted her feelings about how victims have isolation issues. And despite all of the resources, we never really focus on why a lot of people don't go and seek help. And it's due to isolation. Now, what's so crazy about, I don't want to say crazy, but what's so important about this, and not even coincidental, but I think this is like spiritual, is that on Wednesday, I was at men's Bible study, and one of the biggest issues that people have is isolation. So that is like one of the biggest killers. It's isolation. The devil will isolate you, make you think that no one is there to help. So you're just stuck. And you're not, but to actually say it's okay to talk about these issues, you should not be ashamed, but a lot of us are. I know men don't want to talk about any issue at all, but we need to. We need to. And I want to say thank you to Marica Phipps-Johnson. She founded Battered Not Broken, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting survivors, around 10 years ago. Congratulations to you. She emphasized that more can be done to raise awareness around Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which is in October. So thank you for your courage, Ms. Johnson. I do hope that more people will hear your voice, be inspired to speak out against abuse, because we have to minimize that in order to maximize our future, our children, so they can live in a world where they don't have to be afraid or feel isolated or feel as if they cannot talk about certain issues. So thank you, and thank you, President Biden, for that. Now, we have to focus. And I always say that we have to focus. I always keep our mind focused, because abuse is everywhere. Now, being in the Midwest, well, I'm in Texas, but being in the Midwest, from what I've been reporting on, it's getting crazy out there. And we need to recognize what is going on and not be afraid to walk away. I tell people run. If she hits you, run. If he hits you, run. Whatever sort of abuse that they are putting on you, run. It could be sexual abuse, leave. Financial abuse, leave. Cyber abuse, report it. You cannot stay, nor can you change a person. Okay? Here's the thing. If you did not create that hole in their heart, you cannot fill the void that was placed. You didn't do it. So you don't have to be a punching bag. You don't have to be manipulated. You don't have to be lied to. And again, this is not a one gender conversation. This is for both. For as many women who have been abused, so have men. But men were taught to never, ever speak about it. And I guess we were taught when we were younger. I told a client before that when a little girl falls and scrapes her knee, everyone runs to her and says, "Oh, where does it hurt? Talk to me. Talk to me." And when a little boy falls and scrapes his knee, they says, "Get up, be quiet, and let's keep going." So we've been trained to not say anything. We have been trained to think the more pain that we accept as men, the more manly we are. And that's not true. If you don't talk about it, you're a real man. Just deal with it. Machismo. It doesn't work. It's going to come out eventually. We just don't want it to come out in a negative way on a person that does not deserve it. It's the same thing with a woman who's been beaten and beaten and beaten. Then she finally leaves. And then when she gets into another relationship, as soon as something happens, she explodes on that person. Well, he didn't do it, you know. I think that we need to heal before we get into other relationships. And then if we see relationships that's not going anywhere, we should run and leave. And talking about leaving, I have to talk about this amazing woman from the WWE. Her name is Nikki Bella. She's, her legal name is Garcia. I'll just leave it at that. And she reportedly filed for divorce from her husband, Artem. The filing occurred in Napa Valley, California on Wednesday after 2 years of marriage. The divorce filing comes 2 weeks after her husband, Artem, was arrested for felony corporal injury to a spouse or cohabitant on August 29th. He was released on a $25,000 bail. And the initial reports did not specify the victim, but it was later clarified that Artem was charged under California Penal Code Section 273.5A, which makes it illegal to injure a spouse, cohabitant, or parent in an act of domestic violence. There was a 911 call release. I do not want to play that. But if you want to, it was released on TMZ. Once again, I reported on another case in California where a male actor also was arrested for abuse. So this is nothing new. I will always tell you, those people who you see on television is just a job. Those people who run a football or shoot a basketball or hit a baseball or kick a soccer ball are just people. That's their job. It's no one to celebrate because they also go through things. They're regular people. They just do a job that they really love. But they're just regular people. And Artem is with Dancing with the Stars, or was Dancing with the Stars. I don't know his future with that company. And his wife was a wrestler, female wrestler. And they share a 4-year-old. Now, when we talk about children, that touches my heart. I'm a father. And we don't know what their child saw. Is that child traumatized? Was that child at home when the incident happened? How many incidences happened in front of the child? We don't know. Now, again, we can't go off of social media because they posted about their second wedding anniversary. And if you see pictures online, you see them hugging and huge smiles and everything. That doesn't mean everything is always rosy in any relationship. We're always going to have issues. I always tell people who I counseled that never trust social media, because you always see people smiling. No one gets on there and say, hey, I am in trouble. Hey, I'm going through some things. So take the time and check up on your friends. Take the time to hold your friends accountable if they're doing something wrong. Take the time and hold your friends if they're going through something. It's necessary. I want you guys to pray for President Biden as he transitions back into, I guess, the civilian world. Pray for those victims in all over the world. But as we were talking about those victims in Columbus, Ohio, and in the Midwest, there's a real rise in fatalities in domestic abuse. So there are families who are mourning. There are people that are going to jail for a long time. Hopefully they get reformed while they're there. There are families who need prayer. And to Nikki and Artem, hopefully they get the help and the counseling that they need. Either they split and they have to co-parent. But these issues, anger, these issues where people are dying, this should never be normalized. And on this podcast, it will not be normalized. We are going to talk about how we can continue to better ourselves for our future and for the future of our children. It's necessary. So, as I always say, I want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for giving me your time. Thank you for taking time out. You could be walking, you could be cooking, you could be in your car at the gym. But it's stories like these that remind us of the urgency of what we need to do to reform our communities. It takes us. It's not the government. It's not a law. It's the character of the person. We have to make the changes. If we make the changes, the children will change, and that means our future will change. Let's make the change. So if you are someone that you know is experiencing domestic abuse, please reach out to rickycwilliams.com/blog. There will be a link at the end of all show notes where you could get a private call, get the help that you need. It's necessary. Also, please like, share, and comment. We really want to get this out to people to show the strength of a Nikki Bella. We want to show the wisdom of a President Joe Biden, and we want to show the cautions of what's going on in the Midwest, because it's going to touch one of us sooner or later, and we need to change. So, I'm Ricky Williams, urging you to stay informed and stay engaged. Now, as always, GBG, go be great.